The first time I caught her snooping around my boat, she was holding a clipboard like it was a badge of honor. Her name was Ophelia Vance, HOA president, local tyrant, and self-declared defender of aesthetics. She was probably in her early 50s, wore pastel cardigans like battle armor, and had a voice sharp enough to cut drywall. "Mr. Nolan," she called out as I stepped out of my garage, "we need to speak about that." Vessel? I glanced toward my driveway, where my 32-foot patrol boat was parked on its trailer. It was clean, registered, and covered nothing out of place. The hull still bore the faded stencil, Texas Parks and Wildlife Ranger Patrol. I'd retired 2 years ago after 15 years as a ranger, but I kept the boat with permission for personal use. Ophelia tapped the clipboard with a pen. "Boats are not allowed to be stored in plain sight. Section 4B of the HOA bylaws." I walked down the driveway, keeping calm. "That only applies to recreational boats, not active service or government vessels. This one's exempt." Her lips tightened like she'd swallowed a lemon. "But it's not in service anymore, is it? So it counts." "I'd be real careful making claims about what's in service and what's not," I replied. "Some things are above HOA pay grade." That didn't sit well. She huffed, scribbled something, and stormed off. I figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 mornings later, I walked out to an empty driveway. No boat, no trailer, just some drag marks in the gravel. I stood frozen for a second before my brain caught up. My boat had been stolen. I called the sheriff. 20 minutes later, Deputy Klein pulled up and his eyes went wide when I showed him a photo of the boat. "Wait, this is that Ranger vessel. The one used for interagency ops near the border." "Yep," I said. He let out a low whistle. "This boat's tagged as a state asset. This wasn't just theft, this is felony-level property interference." I was already pulling up my security cam footage. And there it was, clear as day, Ophelia herself, standing beside a flatbed tow truck at 6:30 that morning, arms folded, directing the driver like she ran the place. I turned the screen to Klein. He blinked. "She towed a government-tagged patrol vessel. Looks that way." He let out a slow, low laugh. "She just nuked her HOA presidency, man. She's in serious trouble." "What's worse," I said, tapping the screen, "she didn't even read the markings on the hull. She thought it was just a fancy fishing boat." Klein shook his head. "Where'd she have it towed?" I already had a guess. "The HOA-owned impound lot 2 blocks away, used for violations." I hopped in the truck and followed Klein over. Sure enough, there it was, wedged between a busted jet ski and a rusted trailer, my patrol vessel. The back hatch had been forced open, and my emergency gear was tossed around like trash. Klein walked over to the chain link gate. "She broke into this without a warrant or notice. She's toast, right?" He nodded. "Oh, she's more than toast. This is felony theft, tampering with state property, and illegal seizure. You want to press charges?" I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." Ophelia wasn't at the impound lot when we arrived, but that didn't last long. Deputy Klein had radioed it in, and within 15 minutes, a second cruiser rolled up. From it stepped a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark blue uniform with a badge that read Lieutenant Rivas. He scanned the scene with clipped precision, stopping when his eyes locked onto the patrol vessel. "You've got to be kidding," he muttered. "Who authorized this?" Klein gestured to me. "Homeowner here had his property seized by HOA without notice. Boat's a registered state vessel. He's a former ranger. Security footage shows the HOA president orchestrating the tow this morning." Rivas turned to me. "You're Nolan." "That's right. You still have the original transfer paperwork from the department in my home safe. I can get it." "Do that. We'll need it for the report. If this is what it looks like, she's in over her head." At that moment, a silver Lexus pulled up to the curb. Ophelia stepped out, dressed in a navy blue pantsuit, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. She spotted the cruiser, paused, then approached with a forced smile. "There's a misunderstanding," she announced, walking up to the officers. "I was enforcing regulations. That boat was creating an eyesore. I have full authority under section." Rivas raised a hand. "Ma'am, stop talking. You're not under arrest. Yet. But from what I've been told, you directed the removal of a state-tagged vessel from private property without a court order or any legal complaint." Her expression faltered. "I had photographic documentation. It wasn't being used. It was just sitting there. That's not how jurisdiction works, he said flatly. Have you seen the registration on the hull? Did you even verify the ownership before arranging the tow? I assumed. That's your first mistake. Ophelia tried to shift her weight, but her footing was gone. I didn't breach anything. The HOA has the right to impound in violation cases. It's in our charter. And your charter doesn't override state law, Rivas said. This vessel falls under state retention statutes. You've committed unauthorized seizure. That's criminal. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I watched her carefully. Her confidence was unraveling thread by thread. Rivas turned to me. You want to retrieve the paperwork now? I nodded. Be back in 10. By the time I returned, a city code enforcement officer had arrived to someone I recognized, a stocky man named Dev Patel who'd done inspections on our street before. He was taking pictures of the impound lot, documenting the broken latch on the gate, the unsecured perimeter, and the mess of improperly stored equipment. This isn't even zoned for vehicle storage, Dev told Rivas. It's supposed to be a community garden. They never filed to reclassify it, Rivas shook his head. So it's an illegal lot housing a stolen state vessel. I handed over the transfer papers. He scanned them quickly, then looked to Klein. Get this logged into evidence, and call it in. We're opening a formal investigation. I want her HOA's financials and internal memos subpoenaed. Ophelia turned pale. That won't be necessary. We can resolve this quietly. I'll cover damages, of course. There's no need for escalation. I stepped forward. You think paying me off is going to undo what you did? You broke into my property, stole a government asset, and now you want to negotiate like this is a parking ticket. She glanced around, clearly realizing she'd lost control. This is all being blown out of proportion. Rivas raised an eyebrow. You want proportion. Felony theft of government property carries up to 10 years. That's not HOA slap on the wrist territory. She went silent. Klein opened the back of his cruiser. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me. You're not under arrest yet, but we need a statement downtown. She looked like she wanted to vanish, but she nodded, stiff and silent, and slid into the back seat. The door shut with a dull finality. As they drove off, Dev turned to me. You ever see them pull something like this before? Not like this. She's always been obsessed with compliance, but this was something else. He adjusted his clipboard. I'll be filing a separate report with the city. They can't run an impound without zoning. Probably explains why she didn't want anyone poking around. I glanced back at the lot. Think there's more under the surface, Dev nodded. Wouldn't surprise me. Back home, I spent the afternoon calling an attorney I knew from my ranger days, a woman named Carla Reyes who now specialized in property law. I laid out everything: the seizure, the footage, the state registration, the impound lot. She listened carefully, then said exactly what I was hoping for. This is civil and criminal. You've got grounds for damages, defamation, and property loss. If they've been using HOA funds to run that lot, it opens them up to fraud too. You think we can take it to court? She didn't hesitate. Absolutely. But first we get discovery. Once we see their records, we'll know how deep this goes. By the next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Word had spread fast. Someone had posted a clip from my security camera footage on the community message board. It showed Ophelia, arms crossed like a queen, gesturing at my boat as it was hauled away. Comments poured in. So she stole a cop boat. Is that even legal? I voted for her. What a mistake. By noon, the HOA board had gone into damage control. I got a flyer on my doorstep inviting everyone to an emergency community meeting that evening at the clubhouse. I showed up just before 6. The room was packed. Folding chairs lined with worried faces, residents murmuring among themselves. At the front, the remaining HOA board members sat behind a long table, 3 of them, all looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The treasurer, a wiry man named Greg Stanton, stood up. We want to address the recent incident involving President Vance. As of this afternoon, she has chosen to step down. A few people clapped. Others just looked confused. Greg cleared his throat. Until we can review our policies and procedures, all enforcement actions are suspended. I stood. Is the board taking responsibility for what she did? Or are you saying she acted alone? Greg hesitated. We weren't aware of her plans to tow the vessel. She didn't consult anyone before arranging it. Another resident stood Linda Cho, a retired nurse who'd lived on the street for 2 decades. She's been making threats about my son's truck for months, said it was unacceptable for a family vehicle. You're telling us none of you knew? Greg looked cornered. We're conducting an internal review, not good enough, I cut in. A state prosecutor is reviewing the case. If HOA funds were used to pay for that tow, you're looking at more than just bad PR. That's misuse of community money. You'd better hire your own attorney. The room erupted into low murmurs. Someone near the back shouted, "We want a vote, dissolve the board." Greg looked rattled. Let's not overreact, no, I said. Let's do exactly that. From the side, Carla Reyes stepped forward. She'd arrived silently and now held up a stack of papers. I'm the legal representative for Mr. Nolan. I've filed a motion to freeze HOA spending pending investigation. If anyone here wants to join a class action, I'll be staying after the meeting. Greg went pale. The room broke into chaos, and just like that, the neighborhood began to shift. The clubhouse emptied slower than expected. People lingered in tight clusters, voices hushed but urgent. I stayed near the back, watching as Carla collected signatures from folks lining up by the folding table she'd turned into a makeshift intake station. Pens scratched paper, and with every name added, the HOA's grip on the neighborhood crumbled a little more. A man in a faded baseball cap approached me with a nod. You're the guy with the boat, right? Yeah, name's Marcus. I do electrical. She wrote me up last year for having my van parked on my own lawn while I was fixing the breaker box. Said it was commercial blight. I paid the fine, but I never forgot it. He glanced toward the board members huddled at the front, glad someone finally stood up to her. Before I could respond, Carla called out from her table. Nolan, we've got something. I stepped over. She handed me a scanned document on her tablet. Resident just gave us this. He used to audit for a nonprofit, took one look at last quarter's budget report and flagged something. I scrolled through the spreadsheet. One line item stood out like a bruise. External compliance services, $46,000. That's not towing, I said. Nope, Carla replied. That's a slush account. They've been moving money under that name for over a year. It doesn't match any invoices. From behind us, Dev Patel appeared, now dressed in a city-issued windbreaker. He's right. I pulled zoning records after I left the lot. That parcel was never approved for impound use. But here's the kicker. The HOA's been listing it as community improvement storage on tax forms. That's straight-up misrepresentation. Carla's eyes narrowed. That's tax fraud. If they're using HOA funds to maintain an illegal lot and hiding it under false descriptions, the IRS is going to be very interested. I looked toward the board table. Greg was still there, nervously tapping his fingers while the other 2 board members whispered behind him. I walked over. We need your treasurer records, I said. Greg looked up, eyes flicking toward Carla and Dev behind me. I don't have access right now. Ophelia always kept the master login. You're the treasurer. She insisted on managing the digital portal herself. Said it reduced errors. Carla stepped forward. So the president controlled the finances, the enforcement actions, and the impound facility. Greg swallowed. It wasn't supposed to be like that. She said we needed central control. Carla pulled a folder from her bag and slid a form across the table. You're going to sign a declaration stating exactly that. If we file fraud charges, cooperation might reduce your exposure. His hand trembled as he took the pen. That night, I parked the patrol vessel back in my driveway. This time I backed it in tight, locked the trailer hitch, and mounted a wireless security camera above the garage angled directly at the boat. Not taking chances again. The next morning, I got a call from Lieutenant Rivas. We've got a development, he said. You available to come down to the station? I arrived 20 minutes later. Rivas met me in the lobby and led me to a small conference room. Deputy Klein was already inside, along with a woman in a gray blazer who introduced herself as Ada Talia Monroe. Rivas laid a folder on the table. We subpoenaed HOA banking records, not just for the past year. We went back 5. Monroe opened the folder. There's a pattern. Funds diverted into private accounts, mostly under Ophelia's name, but 2 board members show up on the deposits too. $78,000 unaccounted for, Klein added. They weren't just enforcing bad rules. They were using the HOA as a front to skim money. Fines, storage fees, event budgets that never actually funded anything. I leaned back. So it wasn't just overreach. It was a racket, Monroe nodded. And the patrol vessel? That was the mistake that cracked it open. She never thought anyone would question it. Your footage gave us probable cause. Rivas placed a second folder on the table. We also spoke with the tow truck driver. He's cooperating. Said he'd been paid under the table for multiple impounds over the past year. No receipts, no paperwork. Monroe looked at me. Are you prepared to testify? I've already started, I said. She smiled faintly. Good, we're filing charges this week. Fraud, theft, unlawful seizure, and tax evasion. She's facing serious time. I left the station with sunlight in my eyes and a weight lifting off my shoulders. Not because it was over yet, it wasn't, but because we were finally fighting back with proof, not just anger. That afternoon, I met Carla at her office downtown. She was finishing a call when I walked in. State Attorney's office is planning a press release, she said. They're going to name her. That'll spook the rest of the board into cooperating. What about the residents? We're up to 30 signers on the class action. Most of them have copies of fines or letters she sent. Some have receipts for compliance payments that never showed up in the HOA ledger. I nodded. And the lot, city inspection scheduled for tomorrow. They're bringing a demolition notice. It's getting shut down. At dusk, I returned home to find a folded note taped to my front door. No name, just a short message. You don't know what you've started. I checked the security cam. No one visible. Whoever it was had stayed out of frame. I brought the note inside and called Rivas. He told me to keep it, bag it, and drop it off in the morning. We'll dust it. Could be nothing. Could be someone trying to intimidate you. I wasn't rattled. I'd dealt with worse during border patrol operations, but it told me one thing. Someone involved wasn't finished yet. Later that week, I attended a city council meeting. Carla had arranged a speaking slot and we used it. She presented the findings: financial misconduct, illegal land use, and manipulated governance. Council members listened, asked sharp questions, and by the end, one of them, a woman named Linda Torres, leaned into her mic. Based on this evidence, I'll be filing a motion to revoke the HOA's charter under city statute. If they can't operate within the law, they can't operate at all. The room erupted in applause. Back in the neighborhood, things moved fast. Greg resigned. The other 2 board members followed. The HOA office was padlocked by the city, and a notice was stapled to the door. Operations suspended pending legal review. I spotted Marcus again a few days later, working on the wiring of his porch light. You hear, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. We're voting on whether to dissolve the HOA entirely. I gave a short nod. About time people get to decide for themselves, he grinned. You ever think of running for something? People trust you now. I shook my head. I'm better behind the scenes, but I knew I wouldn't be invisible anymore. The boat stayed parked where it belonged, untouched. And this time, it wasn't just mine, it had become a symbol. A reminder that no one, not even a cardigan-clad tyrant, gets to rewrite the rules of ownership and law to suit their personal crusade. The system that had once been used to punish and intimidate was now under investigation, its power unraveling one subpoena at a time. And the people who had once kept their heads down were finally standing up, not just for themselves but for each other. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning, tucked into the docket between a petty theft and a zoning dispute. But by the time I stepped into the county courthouse, it was clear this wasn't going to be treated like some minor civil quibble. A bailiff was guiding media crews into a roped-off section, and the courtroom gallery was already half full with residents from the neighborhood. Carla Reyes walked beside me with a case folder under her arm, her pace steady and calm. She'd worn a charcoal suit instead of her usual blazer, something subtle but deliberate. She nodded toward the far end of the room. There, she said, 2 of the former board members. They've filed individual waivers. One's accepted immunity, the other's cooperating for leniency. I looked over and spotted them, Carl and Dana, both looking about 10 years older than they had a month ago. Dana's eyes darted to mine before she looked away. Judge Halbrook entered with the usual shuffle of papers and robe, but when he sat, he leaned forward with the kind of interest that told me he already knew what kind of mess he was about to wade into. "I've reviewed the preliminary findings," he said, peering over his glasses. "This hearing is not just about property rights. We're looking at potential criminal referrals, municipal violations, and civil damages against a community organization acting under false pretense. Let's proceed." The prosecutor, Ada Monroe, stood first. She presented a timeline how Ophelia Vance had unilaterally seized my patrol vessel, how she'd bypassed legal procedures, and how this act had led to the discovery of financial irregularities, zoning fraud, and misuse of community funds stretching back several years. Then she called me to the stand. I took the oath and sat, the microphone humming faintly as I adjusted it. "Mr. Nolan," Monroe began, "can you explain how you came into possession of the vessel in question? It was transferred to me upon my retirement from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. It was cleared by the agency's legal office and registered for personal use. It retains its original markings because I was granted permission for historical preservation purposes." "And did the defendant, Miss Vance, ever request documentation before seizing the vessel?" "No." "She never asked for anything. Did she leave any notice before removing it from your property?" "No, I discovered it was gone when I walked outside that morning." Monroe turned to the judge. "We have video evidence of the unauthorized removal and witness testimony confirming she used HOA funds to pay in cash for the tow. No board vote, no paperwork, and no warrant." When she rested her case, Carla stepped forward for the civil side. She laid out the financial structure of the HOA, how funds were funneled through vague line items, how residents were issued fines with no consistent criteria, and how the impound lot was operated illegally on misclassified land. Then, she handed Judge Halbrook a thick folder. "This is a signed statement from a forensic accountant who reviewed the HOA's ledgers. He found over $80,000 in unaccounted revenue, all routed through personal bank accounts. We also included copies of the city's zoning inspections, which confirm the impound lot was maintained without proper permits, fencing, or insurance." The judge thumbed through the documents in silence, then looked up. "Call the defendant." Ophelia rose from the defense table. Her attorney, a man who looked like he regretted taking her case, adjusted her microphone as she sat. She wore a gray blouse, her makeup more subdued than usual, but her posture was still rigid. "Miss Vance," the judge began, "you've heard the testimony and reviewed the evidence. Do you dispute that you arranged the removal of Mr. Nolan's vessel?" "I believed I was enforcing the community's bylaws," she said. Her voice was thinner than before, less certain. "It was unsightly. I acted in good faith." Monroe stood again. "And did you consult the rest of the board before taking action?" "There wasn't time. I made a judgment call." "Did you know the vessel was a state-registered patrol boat?" "I thought it was decorative. It wasn't being used." "It looked abandoned. Did you verify that with any agency?" "No." Monroe crossed her arms. "So you acted on an assumption without legal authority and used community funds to facilitate a private seizure. Then stored it on a lot not zoned for vehicle holding, which you claimed on tax documents as a public improvement space." Ophelia hesitated. "I didn't manage the taxes directly. Yet the deposits from collected fines went into your personal account." She blinked. "That was a reimbursement system." Judge Halbrook raised a hand. "Enough, I've heard sufficient testimony." He leaned back, tapping a pen against the arm of his chair. "This court finds that the seizure of Mr. Nolan's vessel was unlawful. Furthermore, the HOA's financial practices under Miss Vance's leadership were deceptive, unregulated, and in violation of multiple municipal codes." He looked at Monroe. "You may proceed with criminal referral." Then he turned to Carla. "And the civil suit may advance to full discovery. I'm authorizing immediate access to the HOA's digital and physical records." Finally, he addressed the room. "This case highlights the danger of unchecked authority in private governance. Miss Vance, you operated your position as though it gave you power over the law. It does not." You are hereby removed from any legal capacity within the HOA, effective immediately. Furthermore, the HOA itself is under investigation for dissolution pending community vote. He struck the gavel once. Adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the air buzzed with conversation. Residents clustered in groups, some angry, others relieved. A few reporters hovered nearby, but no one approached me. Carla and I stood near the steps, watching as Ophelia was led to a patrol car not handcuffed, but flanked by 2 officers. "She's being booked on financial misconduct," Carla said. "Fraud, embezzlement, and unlawful seizure. They're skipping straight to felony charges," I nodded. "She'll be lucky if she walks away with probation." "She won't," Carla replied. "There's too much evidence." And she burned every bridge she had. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood transformed. With the HOA suspended, residents began organizing their own meetings informal, open invite, and democratic. Marcus helped coordinate lawn care volunteers. Linda Cho took over communication logs. The fines stopped. The threats ended. People started talking to one another again. Eventually, a formal vote was held at the community center. Paper ballots, 1 per household. The question was simple: dissolve the HOA. The tally was overwhelming. 71 households in favor, 9 opposed. The HOA was gone. I kept the patrol vessel parked in my driveway, not out of defiance, but as a reminder. The paint had started to peel in places, so I touched it up, careful to preserve the original stenciling. I'd even started letting some of the neighborhood kids climb aboard during weekends, showing them the old searchlights and maps. One afternoon, while tightening a bolt near the bow, a boy asked me what the boat had done. "It kept people safe," I told him. "And it still does." He squinted at the faded lettering. "Even when it's parked," I smiled and handed him the wrench. Especially then. The neighborhood didn't return to what it was before it became something better, not perfect, but honest. People looked out for each other, instead of over each other's fences. And when someone tried to bring up forming a new HOA, the answer was unanimous. Not a chance. We'd learned the hard way what happens when power is handed to the wrong person. But we'd also learned how to take it back with facts, with law, and with each other.